I am delighted to be here once again with Darren Sylvester, lawyer. Also, your backgrounds include being a barrister. We're talking about all things law today because I want to talk to you a little bit about how to find a lawyer, solicitor, and how to deal with one, how to get the best out of one. First of all, I guess there might be all sorts of situations where somebody might need a lawyer. Can you just tell us a little bit about the different scenarios when somebody might need to find a lawyer?
Generally in life, when purchasing a property,
Yes.
conveyancing solicitor or legal executive, divorce, may need, or probably will need a family law solicitor that deals with divorce. Sadly, in employment law claims, where unfair dismissal, redundancies, employment lawyers, and there's a whole array. Purchasing a business, you need a company law solicitor.
Yes.
If you're doing music or publishing a book, you may need an intellectual property.
Yes, you're bringing all sorts of things back to my memory now, being a business coach and thinking all that stuff. So all of these different situations. Can you just tell us a little about, for those people who are curious and looking in, lawyer, solicitor, they seem to be interchanged. Can you just tell us what's the difference?
A lawyer seems to be the generic term for barrister, solicitor, legal executive, notary public, generic term. The distinction, solicitor, barrister, notary, legal executive, paralegal, all have different branches, but essentially a solicitor is a person with legal or non-legal qualifications that do a further course, professional course to then and do training contracts to be admitted as a solicitor. A barrister again can be a person with a law degree or non-law degree that again does a further professional course, does pupillage in chambers to become a tenant in chambers to become a barrister. So the routes all have different routes, but essentially they're certified by professional courses and then a further period of training in chambers or in a firm. Similar with a notary, pretty much similar with a paralegal. Paralegals tend to need a little bit of further training.
Just for the most of those terms people will be very familiar with, just very quickly touch on the notary and the paralegal. Just tell us in a sentence or so what those two are.
Okay, start with paralegal first. Paralegal tend to be people that have law degree or other degrees, have done a course to, to get their qualifications, but then may not have been admitted to become a solicitor, and so are still doing a further period of work as a paralegal because training contract places are quite fierce. Not everyone can be accepted, so they may stay for a longer period as a paralegal. And notary is a very specialised branch of the legal profession because they deal with certifying legal documents for abroad and in different legal jurisdictions.
I see.
So that's a very specialised field, and they have a legal stamp which they use, which certifies that the document is true and authorised and it can be used around the world.
That's really useful. So that, and as you're saying, this umbrella term of law, and then there'll be different routes and different kind of branches, and you said there might be all these different scenarios in which somebody might need a lawyer. It strikes me there's a couple of things here. That what are the scenarios? What are the kind of scenarios in which you can deal with something yourself and when you need a lawyer? Because in a number of these situations, starting up a business, that there's divorce, or there might be or other challenges, or you need a contract for something and so on. What are the times that you can do it yourself, or what are the telltale signs when you should really deal with a lawyer? And I ask that partly because people are often nervous when it comes to them dealing with lawyer, and we'll come on to in a second about how to get the best out of lawyer. But can you just tell us a little bit about what are the scenarios where you might be able to do something yourself, or that telltale signs of actually for this you need an expert?
I think the common scenarios I've come across is people drafting their wills themselves. It can be done, and if done well, it can be successful. But there are certain terms and uses of languages that need to be used in wills, and certain things that need to be, or requirements that need to be incorporated in the will, that, if not done, can leave disastrous consequences of the will being invalid.
Got you. So this is good. So first we'll start to up for the will. So with that, there might be certain stuff you need to do, but there might be a point where you need a lawyer to make sure that all the legal language, unless you are an expert yourself, is dealt with. Right. That's that one dealt with.
There's a lot online these days, and certain sites. Google. You can Google some stuff where you might need to draft certain things yourself. Again, it may not have the right legal language, but you can at least have a first attempt and then run it by Citizens Advice Bureau or Law Centre, or even ask the solicitor for a moderate fee to deliver it. So there's contracts you may have a go at drafting. You may, in a divorce, you may know what or the parties may know what they want from the divorce in terms of how the assets are to be split, and maybe just get the professional to incorporate that into an order of some
Yes.
description for the court to approve.
Yeah.
That will limit costs. But essentially, when you get into the more, should we call it, detailed and some would say esoteric elements of the law, like intellectual property and things like that, that is an area where advice should at least be sought.
Right, and I'd imagine also when things become contested, where things are bit, that's when you need that.
As well.
Right. So that's really useful. So there's some things where it might be that you can find the contract or thing yourself, or make a start and then run it by somebody. Or in the case of a divorce, where you might be able to minimise the cost by you've agreed the assets, you run it by a professional lawyer, and then you can get those things formalised and so on. Let's deal with then that whole process of when then you are dealing with a lawyer. Let's start with how to find one in the first place, because it does strike me, and I think that I find as a coach and as a business coach, and many times where I spot that people really should approach a lawyer. There might be all sorts of factors why people don't. Let's talk about that first of all. How should you go about finding one?
People I know that have used lawyers do so through word of mouth. So
Yes.
they may have family or friends, and the lawyers come by recommendation. They've done a good job in the past. Their fees have not been too high or been reasonable, and they're recommended. If that's not the case for an individual, then again online you've got Find a Solicitor, which is the Law Society's portal.
You're right.
You can type in the area of law that you need a solicitor for, or the firm if you can want to use a specific firm, and they'll bring up a list of the names of people in that firm or whatever.
So that's Find a Solicitor. Does it have a separate URL? Do you know, or do you just go to the Law Society? Or you
I think you can go on the Law Society and find it. I think it's
Right.
findasolicitor.org.uk or something
Okay,
like that. But
okay.
type in Google Find a Solicitor and it'll be
Yeah.
the first one that comes up.
Right.
And you just type in, say, the firm or the individual,
That's really
and
useful.
or the area of law you need
Yeah.
help with, and that will come up. There are directories. If you go to a fairly good library,
Yeah.
that will have a legal section. There'll be a legal directory, the Legal 500,
Right.
or the Law Society's directory, the Bar directory, and you can find.
Brilliant. So between this thing of the word of mouth and these directories, you should be able to find a lawyer. So you found a potential lawyer.
Yep.
How do you spot if that lawyer is right for you? Because I'd imagine it might be one of the most important purchases that you that you make. You want to make sure that it's right, and I guess that sometimes people might feel intimidated potentially by a lawyer. So what are your tips here, Darren?
I always advise people to do their research. Yes, lawyers are qualified, trained, highly experienced, but they do vary in terms of what they can offer.
Yeah.
For example, a lawyer in Clifford Chance will differ from a lawyer provincially, not only in terms of fees, but in terms of what they can do. So for a conveyancing matter purchasing a house, provincial firms just as good as big city firms. The things you can do is check out their experience, check out the similar matters they've dealt with in the past, see if you like their firm's website, see if you can have an initial consultation with them, to see if you could work with them.
Right. And that will probably be free, maybe?
Some give free
Okay.
consultations,
Yeah.
some now because of the austerity and everything,
Of course.
offer a fixed fee, moderate
Got you.
fixed fee,
Got you.
£75 or something,
Yeah.
but majority should be a free initial consultation.
Yeah.
Depends on the size of the firm. Smaller firms may ask for a little fee,
Yeah.
the larger ones will probably do it for free.
Yeah.
And as I say, the mixture of doing your research, checking experience, having a consultation, finding if they've done that or similar work in the past, should all then give you the right mix to see whether it's right for you to instruct that firm or that
Fantastic.
individual on that matter.
Fantastic. And then presumably when you've met them, you just see if the chemistry-wise, if it feels right. Is there sometimes, a question just came to my mind, can you sometimes, depending on the size of the firm that you deal with, you might have met one person, if they're a big firm, they may not be the person who you end up dealing with. I guess if somebody's lucky enough to work with somebody like yourself, they meet you, the person that they're going to be working with is going to be yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about what the advantage about working with smaller firms and larger firms, generally speaking, as you perceive it?
Smaller firms, you generally will get the person you see working on your working on your matter.
Yeah.
Sometimes an assistant,
Yeah.
assist department or whoever. Generally, it's a more personal service. The larger firms tend to be more layered in terms of the partner, the associate, the the senior solicitor, whatever name brackets they give them, and there's more layered tier and can be more costly because you've got different levels of fee earner working on the matter. But that's not to say you won't get an equally good service with a smaller firm to a larger firm. It's just, again, what type of matter it is.
And what perhaps suits you and your style.
Suits you and your style. So.
Okay, that's so useful. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we should cover here. your specialism here is you work with the cases of solicitors' negligence particularly. What should somebody do if something goes wrong? I know we've done a separate film on that people can look at, talking a bit of background in terms of professional negligence. But if there are just problems, or what's the best way, maybe to start with even before the problem bit, what's the best way of getting the best out of your solicitor? Let's just touch on that first of all.
The best way to get the best out of your solicitor is to engage. It's a two-way process. Don't feel that you've abdicated or delegated everything to him or her, the solicitor, but also let them get on with what you've asked them to do. Keep records, keep documents, try and keep your own file electronic or paper, and as I say, it's a two-pronged approach. If and when problems do arise, not necessarily negligence, but it could be a complaint. All firms, barristers' chambers will have a complaints process. You can activate that complaints process, or initially say you're unhappy about something. Right. It may be resolved at that first level.
Yes.
If it's still not resolved at that first level, then that's generally when the complaints process is invoked.
Yes.
And they will investigate whatever the complaints are. If it's still not resolved, you can go to the legal ombudsman.
Yes.
This is a government or statutory scheme that assists people resolving complaints with solicitors or legal professionals. There's also a financial ombudsman for financial claims. But if you're getting into the area now of negligence rather than complaints and issues, then that's a separate area.
That's a separate and that's one of the areas that, for example, a firm like yours might be able to help you with.
Yeah, I purely do professional negligence. I can assist with anything, bringing claims or advising on claims. That's what I do. But it's a separate area to the complaints process. It has pre-action. It has its own protocol, which is a sort of separate scheme of how the claim is to be dealt with. Beyond that, there are specific rules of how to bring the court process, how to start the court process, and it's a quite niche area of law that a professional should be sought to advise on, or to explain to the client or an individual that they have a valid or do not have a valid claim before the process goes on.
And maybe that we might at some point do a separate short one of these films to talk people through if they're going to court. So because I know being barristers is part of your background as well, so it might be interesting for us to touch on that. Just before you go, I just want to touch on one thing that lots of people would tell me off of not raising with you if I didn't cover, and that's the thing about cost. I'd imagine that there's going to be a really interesting thing here about, there's going to be a cost of going to a solicitor, but there's also going to probably be a cost if you don't in many cases.
That's very true.
So can you tell us, Darren, what's your thought? Because I'd imagine all sorts of people probably worry and all of that about that. And I guess the first thing is to find out or to think. But can you give us just a few tips here about cost or guidelines about cost? I know that if we give specific costs, it might be very difficult to do because of the timing when people happen to watch this or what have you. But can you just give us just some tips and so on around this whole area about cost? People think, okay, well, I should be going to a solicitor, but I don't have the money and I'm worried about how much it will cost. Just thoughts and tips.
A lot of my work I do now is on a fixed fee basis. Right. So clients, individuals will know what the fee is before we start.
Right.
And I do a lot of my work through Skype, advising, or sometimes in person, so there's no sort of hidden.
Got you. So you might be able to deal with a solicitor whereby, and many solicitors will do this, whereby you have a conversation that the fee is fixed, you don't need to worry about that next letter, that next call, that next. Just about
if the matter goes on, then I do enter into agreements whereby there's an hourly rate.
Right, yes.
But generally, a lot of my work now is fixed fee.
Yeah.
But the way costs can be short-circuited, should I say, is that for many different types of claims, now I'm not talking about professional negligence specifically, is that people's motor insurance policies or house insurance policies can have, you have to check, it depends if you took it out when you renewed your policy, is legal expenses insurance.
Right.
And what legal expenses insurance does is that if you have a road traffic accident claim, personal injury claim, as part of your home or motor insurance policy, they will deal with the claim, instruct lawyers that are generally panels of the insurance company, and there's no real extra add-on. Because you've paid for it as part of it.
So it's well worth checking with some of those fields with your policy because you might have something that's covered. Yeah.
If that's not the case for whatever reason, then I say many solicitors now operate fixed fee services. Yeah. They will operate conditional fee agreements. Essentially, what that means is that if you win, there's no fee. If you don't win, the other side.
I see.
If you don't win, there's no fee. If you win, the other side pays all the costs. So no win, no fee. There's damages-based agreements. I won't go into that too much, but it's a fairly new concept. But essentially, if you win your case under the agreement, then the solicitor will take a proportion of the cost of your damages.
Right.
So you don't have to foot it up front.
Right. Okay.
But it's taken after you win.
Right. Yes.
And that's subject. It's a fairly new concept, but it's gathering some
momentum.
pace,
And for people who are really worried that they've got a very limited budget, that their income is very low, there are law centres and things like the legal advice and the Citizens Advice Group. Do you want to say something about these kind of places and where they're at, or what they can do, and when you might then still need to go to a lawyer and so on? Can you give us a bit of an idea here?
Law centres and Citizens Advice Bureau do exist, although they are now few in number due to the legal aid cuts and the government's austerity measures.
Yeah.
But they tend to exist around libraries, fairly large-sized libraries, or independently. So you've got in London, you can Google law centres and find some in maybe the Bow Shoreditch area. Brixton and that sort of area. They're very good for seeing, and generally they will be solicitors, they're qualified advisors, to just get an initial idea whether you have a claim, whether it's a thing to proceed with or not, or to get advice on drafting a letter, how it should be approached, or tactics. They're good for that. It's all free. But sometimes there can be waits because there's quite a demand now for a lot of them. And they deal with a whole range of areas: immigration, employment, family, matrimonial, laws of probate. They deal with a lot of issues. But yes, if you can explore that area and get an initial sort of sounding board, then that's very good. I do a lot of advisory work in my field.
Yes.
Not only on professional negligence, but civil litigation, wills and probate. But I focus more on professional negligence.
What you've shared with us today is so useful. I want to thank you for it. Is there any, just wrapping up, if you had to just give people one word of advice if they're dealing with a lawyer, or just one word, or just a bit of encouragement, because I guess nobody wants a scenario where you've got to go to a lawyer ideally, unless you're so excited about that big deal or whatever that they're going to be drafting for you. But just a word of encouragement, or just one top tip of dealing with a lawyer.
I would say it's like in all things in life, you want to aim to build a relationship and not be afraid or, I wouldn't say timid, but be nervous of any. It's another part of life's journey. Having to see a lawyer, sometimes for good reasons, purchasing the property, sometimes for bad reasons, the death of a family individual. But it should be approached with the right mindset and just trying to build and forge a relationship as you would do in an employment, starting a new job, finding a new partner. If you can equate it to that
so that's going to help to get the best out of that. Well, thank you so much, Darren. Thank you so much for your time, and wishing you all the best with your business. Thank you very much. Take good care.